I'm going to read from the manuscript, and then I'll have you comment on that. When I was 8 years old, one of my brothers was in a life-altering accident. When I was 9, that brother committed a violent suicide. Right around the time I turned 14, my stepfather told me of his desire to molest me. When I was a junior in high school, he actually tried to. When I was 17 years old, a peer raped me while I was unconscious. When I was barely 20, an uncle attempted to murder me in my sleep because I was in the way.
You just read chapter 1, called My Mountains.
This is the Nash Rockett Media Experiment.
Hello again, it is I, Nash Rockett, and this is the Almost Famous podcast. We talk to stars and influencers in the making of all kinds, from all walks of life, in hopes of manifesting some sort of life hack, some insider baseball, if possible, to make our journey on this big, beautiful blue orb a little more pleasant. Our guest today is a vibrant and lovely woman who I happen to be an acquaintance of. She's just penned her first book called Moving Mountains, A Hero's Journey, Survivor's Memoir. And we're going to talk to her about the book here in a little tiny bit. But first of all, you can't see me, but I'm standing up giving you a standing ovation right now. Audra Rene Weeks, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Rocket.
You're
great.
I'm good at the introductions. Hey,
I concur.
You have you're an author. You're a new author. This is your first book. I'm excited to talk about it, but you have a lot of certifications and stuff. Let's start there. Go.
Okay. I received my clinical certification in hypnotherapy. Currently, I am just considered a certified hypnotherapist. I did a lot of energy classes and got certification. I would be called a Reiki master. I received certification in Blue Star Energy, Karuna Reiki. So a lot of energy healing in my tool belt.
Gotcha. I got to tell you, I'm looking at this, the title of this book, and it has the word survivor in it. And I get a little tense when I see a book or a movie or a program or a broadcast that has the word survivor in it, because that always usually requires someone to go through some large measure of pain in order to win that medal. Am I in the ballpark with that assumption?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's definitely a large measure of pain that comes with that word.
All right. Let's start with the basics. Find out a little bit about you. What kind of work do you do? How do you support yourself? I guess that's one of the main things in life everybody has to deal with, right?
Yes. I am a professional nanny. I Google too, because every time someone asks me, what do you do? And I say, I'm a professional nanny, and I cannot help but at the same time have the Queen song running through my head. Fat Bottom Girls.
That word just makes me giggle, Audra. Say it again for me.
Nanny or Fat Bottom Girls?
Well, all of them, actually. But the professional nanny, the word nanny is just adorable, isn't it?
You know what? It makes me think of a goat.
Really?
Where does nanny come from? Like a nanny goat, or is that a ninny goat?
No, it's a nanny goat. And I don't know. I don't know how that fits into the whole child caring industry. Do you?
I don't either.
Yeah.
We as humans come up with some pretty creative words that are weird.
Speaking of child caring, I know from our casual conversations you have children, right?
I do. I have 3 kids. My daughter is my oldest, and she is 29. She married and has given me 2 beautiful grandbabies. And then I have a son that's 25, and he is also married and has given me 2 beautiful grandbabies. And then my baby, my youngest, is Chandler, and he is 20, and he's in the Coast Guard currently.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I thank him for his service. You should be proud of that.
I am proud of it.
So, which describes you best in high school? Cheerleader, chess club, or ditch class for an illegal activity?
Definitely C. C is me.
You were a class ditcher. Do you know what? I was so timid and tepid when I was in school. I don't think I ever once ditched class. To go out and, well, that's not true. Me and Johnny Clark, one time, ditched class, study hall, last class of the day, and went to Nonconnah Creek and went swimming with a whole bunch of, so I lied, I did ditch class. But it wasn't in
Wow, you have a great memory, Rockett.
Well, I remember that. I mean, that was because it was so odd. It was, it was not a normal behavior for me. Did you go to college? What did you study?
I did go to college. I didn't complete it, but I attended for 2 years, and in that 2 years, I was majoring in psychology and minoring in criminal law.
Wow.
It was when I got pregnant with Chandler. I stopped going to college and did the whole stay-at-home mom thing. So being that we only had one income coming in, it was not feasible, for the cost of college to continue.
So let's talk about moving mountains, a hero's journey. They say, whoever they is, that each and every one of us has a book in us. Can you confirm or deny that?
I confirm.
How long have you been working on the book?
The book is complete. It is now in the editing phase of its journey, and it took me 14 months. When I made the decision to write the book, it took me 14 months to put it on paper, but in essence, I've been writing this book my whole life.
So before we get into the book content, how did you write that book? You see online, click here and we'll teach you how to write a book and make $1 million, that sort of thing. You see all those clickbait ads to get help to write a book or some course that will teach you how to do that. Did you go that route, or did you just trudge through it and discover it as you went along?
I did not go that route. I just opened up Word document and started writing my book. So I did it the old school way.
So
well, I guess the old school way would actually be taking a pen and writing it on paper, but no, I didn't have any fancy, like anything guiding me through writing it. I just opened up the Word document and started writing.
Looking back on it, would you have gotten some instruction or taken a class on that, or what? Were you happy with the way it turned out?
I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and I, in general, can tend to complicate things, and for me, that would have been taking a class and all that would have been basically complicating the process.
It would have slowed you down.
It would have slowed me down.
Yeah.
It was best to just to start, and you have to go through a process anyway when you're editing, and then when you go to publish, that's going to format it to a specific specification. So there's no need, as far as I was concerned, to go through that at the beginning. I just wrote it.
Okay. Let's get into Moving Mountains. I'm going to read from the manuscript, and then I'll have you comment on that. When I was 8 years old, one of my brothers was in a life-altering accident. When I was 9, that brother committed a violent suicide. Right around the time I turned 14, my stepfather told me of his desire to molest me. When I was a junior in high school, he actually tried to. When I was 17 years old, a peer raped me while I was unconscious. When I was barely 20, an uncle attempted to murder me in my sleep because I was in the way.
You just read chapter 1, called My Mountains.
Holy crackers. Where do you want to start? That's chapter 1.
Yes, that's chapter 1 in its entirety.
Now I'm assuming that you go into the book then and break down all those things and unpack them, right?
I do. So when people ask me, what's your book about? I always give the short answer. The easy answer is it's about healing trauma. But really, the book is about so much more than that. It's about awareness. It's about the healing journey. I do unpack all those traumas. Each one has its own chapter. And I walk through the process of cognitive therapy. I talk about the collateral beauty and going through hard things, how there's always light in even our darkest hours. And I talk about the subconscious mind a little bit and how that works, and core beliefs and shattering those core beliefs, rewriting new ones. There's a lot of content in the book. It's definitely a hero's journey.
Now, I'm familiar intimately, really, with Joseph Campbell's book from 1949, A Hero's Journey. And that turned into a tome of how to write any kind of narrative, particularly movies. Because all the great screenwriters back in the 70s and the 80s used that as their guide to write movies, to write movie scripts. And I mean, the biggest movies in the world, Star Wars and E.T. and all those, Indiana Jones, all of those are great examples of what he taught. Now, what is your connection to that?
So there's actually a chapter in my book called A Hero's Journey, and I talk about Joseph Campbell and that whole concept and the 12 stages of the hero's journey. And I believe that the reason why we connect so deeply with these movies and books that are written with this particular pattern is that it's because it's a template of our life, really, and we're connecting with that template. We don't really recognize it happening, but on a subconscious level, we are recognizing this template that we're living our life by. And I think one of the things that we miss when we're watching these movies that are so incredible, is we see these heroes in the movie, but in our life, we're constantly looking outside of ourselves for that hero. But really, that hero is within us. We are our hero. But I think that's one of the reasons why we connect so deeply and can relate to movies, is we're watching our own life in some form or fashion unfold right before our very eyes.
8 or 9 years old, you had a situation with your brother, a tragic situation. You want to talk about that?
Sure.
What happened?
You want
Yeah, well, what happened? He had a life-altering accident. What was that?
He was in a motorcycle accident, and he suffered some severe brain damage from that. He rehabilitated quite a bit, but he still had a lot of struggles and a lot of issues, and he suffered from depression from that. His life completely changed. And I don't, I was only 8 when that happened, but looking back on it, I don't feel like he knew how to fit into the world anymore as who he was after that accident. And he committed suicide. He ultimately committed suicide because he couldn't handle his reality anymore. It was too hard.
How do you think that affected you at that age?
So at 9, I feel like I was cushioned a little bit, because at 9, you don't have any awareness really around the finality of death, and you don't really understand suicide and the profoundness of taking your own life. Like, that was not a concept at 9 years old that I could grasp. So
sure.
I remember how I felt about it. It was, for me, it was like, well, he was sad, he was suffering, he's in heaven now. Like, I don't understand why the situation looks this way around me. And so I absorbed a lot of how to handle grief. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what I felt about it was literally me feeling what everybody else was feeling around me. And my takeaway from that experience was, like, suicide, that was really hard for my mom. And so how we handled it was we didn't handle it. Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about it. It got swept underneath the carpet. It was kind of like, and which was very odd for me, and I didn't understand it, because I was only 9 and I wanted to talk about Mark and celebrate him, and it was like I would start talking about him and I would get shushed.
Don't bring it up.
Yep, I would get shushed. It was too hard for my mom to handle, and she did a lot of grieving behind closed doors. I think there was a lot of suffering and silence, and even though I didn't understand it, and my capacity to process all of it was at a 9-year-old level, I could feel it. I could feel the heaviness and the sadness and the grief. And basically what I learned was, when things are too hard for us to handle or feel too hard for us to handle, we don't. We sweep them under the carpet and we go into some form of denial. And that's how I learned how to deal with stressful situations or trauma. So later in life, when I was going through all these other things, I didn't process them. I didn't deal with them. I swept them under the carpet until they crept up on me later in life.
The second incident you talk about in chapter 1, right around the time I turned 14, my stepfather told me of his desire to molest me. When I was a junior in high school, he actually tried to. What's the story there?
For that, without giving too much detail away, because I don't want to be, the spoiler for
sure.
people reading the book, but
sure.
He had a conversation with me, basically telling me about his desires of wanting to molest me, and that was, I had a lot of struggle around that, obviously, because here's this man that's supposed to be a father figure in my life, and at the age of 14, I didn't have any experience at all around sexuality, and my first experience with it is from a completely inappropriate source.
Yeah.
And I struggled to tell my mom about it because, back in that day, they used to have the after school specials, and a lot of times, this would be a bit of some of the topic they would talk about, but the parents never believed the child, so I was terrified to go to my mom with what had happened. But eventually I did, with the help of my best friend's mom, and she believed me. And she decided to stay with him. And so then I found myself, living under the same roof with this man that's supposed to be a father figure, carrying the weight of knowing that he thought of me when he was having sex with my mom. It was a lot to handle. But my mom, she would try to talk to me about it, but I had learned with what we went through with my brother, like it was uncomfortable for me, and I learned that we don't talk about the uncomfortable stuff.
Sure.
So my method of handling it was telling her that I was fine, and I wasn't. I wasn't fine. Nobody, show of hands of who would be fine with that. But all she had to go on was what I was telling her, and I was telling her I was fine. So yeah, that was a really tough situation, and we just stayed away from each other. I wouldn't be in the same room with him, and eventually we came full circle back to him actually trying to attempt to molest me. So.
I wonder how common that is. I hear you describe it about we brush it under the rug, sweep it under the rug. Let's not talk about the bad stuff. There's places we don't go. There's things we don't talk about. I bet that is so common in families.
I agree with you, Rockett. I think it is common, and that's one of the reasons why I found the courage to write this book, because I carried so much shame. I felt because people didn't talk about things, like there was something to be ashamed of, like we needed to hide it away. And I think that a lot of people are carrying so much grief and pain because they were taught, this is what they were taught. We don't talk about it. And I felt silenced almost my entire life, and I was dying a slow death inside because of it. And so, my hope with this book is to give people the courage to tell their stories and hold their heads up high and not feel shame, about what they've gone through. And
it's something in our culture that like you just described, makes you and women and men, I guess, feel silenced, and that they can't talk about that. What is that, do you think?
I don't know, and that's a conversation that I've had several times with my therapist. When I was raped when I was 17 years old, and I never told a soul until probably 3 or 4 years ago. I finally spoke it out of my body. It brings tears to my eyes right now.
I understand that.
But there are so many people, like you said, women and men that are housing this pain and trauma because they don't feel safe to speak it out of their bodies, and they keep these secrets like they're dirty, and they're not. It's uncomfortable to be the person that's talking about such things, and it's also uncomfortable for the person that's listening, that's hearing, because what do you say? It's hard to know what to say to bring someone comfort, but I truly believe that we as human beings, this world would be a much better place if we held space better for people to tell their stories.
Got to be honest
without
about
feeling
it.
ashamed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I can relate to this. I was molested when I was a kid, and I had
So you haven't had the life that you were talking about at the beginning when you read chapter 1. You've had your experiences.
Yeah, I have, but more specifically on a point that you made, I was able to push that so deep down to the bone, down to the soul, I guess, that up until about 10 years ago, I had completely buried it and hidden it. And I'll tell you what brought it out. I was watching, was it 10 years ago? No, it couldn't have been that. About 7 years ago. I was watching one of the beginning seasons of Ray Donovan. And spoiler alert, Ray Donovan was molested by a Catholic priest when he was a boy. And he ended up killing that priest. I had completely forgot about my circumstance. I had completely buried it. And then when I saw that show and that particular episode, I went, oh my God, something similar.
Triggered.
Yeah, something similar happened to me.
Yeah, you were triggered.
Wow. It was amazing.
And I can relate to what you just said there about burying things so deeply, and that's exactly what I had done. I've been through all these major experiences, and I was so good at burying them. I mean, there's certain things that came about in my life that showed that I was definitely wounded. You know, I was making choices that a healthy person would not make.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like understanding why I was making these choices or where this behavior was stemming from, I wouldn't. I mean, it was buried so deep that it didn't even occur to me like, hey, maybe I'm a train wreck because I haven't processed or dealt with any of these things. And I didn't process or deal with anything at all. I went to counseling for a few sessions after the situation with my uncle, but that therapist wanted me to go back to my brother's suicide, and I was not, you know, that's not how I learned how to deal with things. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't talk about it, and I wasn't ready to go there, so I stopped going to therapy, and I resorted to drugs, basically, to cope with what was not manageable to me, and that my life was definitely not manageable after that.
I want to talk about the drugs in a minute, but you just said something that opened my eyes to something. We tend to bury things, particularly the bad things that happen to us, because we are afraid of not being supported and, in fact, being shamed. And I wonder if that's what birthed the entire therapy, counseling, psychiatric care industry. I just want to go tell somebody my problem because the people around me, I don't feel safe with sharing this information.
Yeah, and you know what? I believe that we have people that we can talk to and feel, you know, be safe with to talk about our stuff. But I also think that so many people keep their struggles and their trauma silent. So when you're surrounded by people that are being silent about their stuff, it makes you feel, I think, that feeling like they couldn't relate, or, you know, they're not going to be able to handle hearing what I've been through. I think that silence is what makes us feel unsafe. But when we start speaking it out, the people around us are like, me too. Oh my gosh, that happened to you. Let me tell you what happened to me.
Right.
And it creates, if a person has the courage to say what has happened to them, I believe it gives other people the courage to do the same.
Yeah, and you are a courageous person for and just jumping into this lake. I tell you, it's cold and it's deep and it's dark, and kudos and hallelujahs to you for having that courage. And obviously it's been great for you to come out on the other side. You can just hear what can you hear in your voice? The confidence and the resolution in your voice from having gone through this, and that makes me happy to hear that. There's another incident. When I was barely 20, an uncle attempted to murder me in my sleep. I don't want to get into the whole thing. Like you say, we don't want spoilers here. We want people to read the book. But can you touch on that just a tiny little bit?
Sure. I'd like to just say that we're not dealing with your typical person. After the fact, when they found out more information about him, after they caught him after what he did to me, he confessed to a murder of one of his clients. He was a lawyer in California, and he had embezzled money from her. And ultimately, without telling the whole story, he went and beat her to death in her sleep so he wouldn't be found out and disbarred. But so in this situation, you know, him and my aunt were going through a divorce, and there was issues, you know, like usual issues with people fighting over custody and stuff like that of the kids. And his method of dealing with that clearly is not what normal people do. So in that situation, he had made a decision, I believe, to come into the house and kill everybody but my aunt as revenge on her. So clearly the fact that he was willing to kill anybody says that there's something major going on with him. And the fact that he was also willing to kill his own children says that's a whole nother level. He started with me because I was the only one downstairs. And it ended with me. Thankfully, we're all still alive. So,
I mean, you say it ended with you. Were you able to defend yourself? Is that what you're saying?
I was able to defend myself. He did come in, and he clubbed me over the head with a 2x2, and that 2x2 shattered, and then he proceeded to try to strangle me to death. And this was in my sleep. So I was able to fight him off. And here I am. I'm a survivor. There
it is.
Yeah.
There it is. The name of the book is Moving Mountains, A Hero's Journey, a Survivor's Memoir. Wow. And we're talking with Audra Rene Weeks. I love your name, by the way.
Thank you. My dad got my name from the show The Big Valley.
I was going to ask that very question.
He was in love with Linda Evans, who played the character of Audra, and that's where my name came from.
I was going to ask that very question because obviously I watched The Big Valley as well. So there is so much to unpack in this book and in your story, and it's an amazing story and it's fascinating. I appreciate you sharing that with me and my listeners. Obviously, you had made reference to you turned to drugs at some point, and I'm sure that is a common, self-medication is a common thing that people do to further bury their traumas. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. And I think that, I don't know, I still have some shame that I'm working through around the drug issues that I had when I was younger. I'm happy to say that I have been clean from my drug of choice for 23 years now. So
oh, wow.
I'm also a survivor of that because I know that a lot of people don't ever make it through that. They either end up using their whole life, they overdose, they kill themselves. So again, I survived that, and I'm really grateful, for the support that I had in my family that helped me through that time. But yes, I did absolutely I think a lot of people don't realize when someone finds their life unmanageable, that's what they turn to. They turn to something that they feel like they can control, even though it's so the opposite. Drugs, people who are addicted to drugs are completely out of control, but for whatever reason in their mind, they feel like they have some sense of control. And maybe it's, I know I used it as a coping mechanism, a way to hide, escape from a reality that I couldn't handle anymore. When I was using speed, it was, like after everything went down with my uncle, I was terrified to go to sleep. I was terrified to sleep at night. At first, I had my boyfriend watch me when I was sleeping, because I was afraid someone was going to come and try to kill me. Even after they had caught him, it didn't matter in my mind. I was so traumatized.
Sure.
The speed helped me stay awake.
Wow.
So I turned to that a lot of times to stay awake, so I wouldn't have to go through the terror of even falling asleep and knowing I was going to be asleep and vulnerable.
Wow.
So, people don't just say, hey, I think I'm going to do drugs for no reason. I think that there might be some exploration with certain specific drugs, but I think that in a lot of cases, people, there's an underlying reason why they turn to drugs, and sometimes I think that gets forgotten when we're looking at a drug addict and we're judging them, like, why can't you get your life together? What's wrong with you? It's not that hard. And you don't know that person's story or what even drove them to make a choice like that in the first place.
Let me ask you this as we wrap up here. What do you hope the response will be, or what is the best case scenario? Somebody reads your book that has a similar story to yours.
My hope is that me using my voice will give the courage to somebody else to release the pain and trauma that they've been housing within themselves, to use their voice. My hope is that me making it through the other end will give somebody else hope that they can make it through to their end, their other end. My hope is that me showing a bit of what going through therapy looks like might give the courage to someone who otherwise hasn't thought of that or is scared to do that because it's an unknown to them. It might show them that it's not as scary as they might think it is. My hope is that it gives other people the courage to go on their hero's journey, and so they can see that the hero that they're waiting for or looking for or hoping for is themselves.
The name of the book is Moving Mountains, A Hero's Journey, a survivor's memoir. And it's by Audra Rene Weeks, and she's our guest, and I thank you so much. It's coming, the book, in 2020, and we will champion that book because it is a voice that needs to be heard, a story that needs to be told, and she has told it so eloquently and courageously. And I got to tell you, Audra, I am so happy to know you. You make me smile on so many levels, and I congratulate you on your book.
Thank you, Rocket. Thank you for having me on your show, too.
Hi, Nash Rockett here. I really appreciate you listening and watching the Almost Famous podcast. Are you a small business owner or an entrepreneur? Do you market any kind of product or service from your online store? If your answer is yes to any of these questions and you don't have a podcast, you're leaving money on the table. Listen, you can expand your customer base, build authority in your brand, and propel your business to new heights in 2020. Wait, you don't know how to do or launch a podcast? You don't have the time? Hey, that's where we come in. Nash Rockett Media, your comprehensive podcast solution. Call us today, 615-436-4440. 615-436-4440.